Hey, it's Doug here. I wanted to pop in before the episode starts. And honestly, the real reason is there's going to be an ad at some point, but I'm going to also talk to you about other stuff that's going on. So I'll just tell a couple stories before we get to the main episode. Now, this episode is with my friend Adam. One cool thing is I met Adam last year at EconoMe. And I think trying to remember, it was a warm intro through a couple other people. But the thing is, at EconoMe in Cincinnati, everyone's very friendly and welcoming. It's coming up here in a few weeks, and hopefully I'll see many of you out in Cincinnati. I'm very much looking forward to it. I've been the last, I want to say 3 years, but honestly, it kind of blurs together. So I can't remember all the years. There was like the first year, which I didn't make it to, but I made it the second year when Carl was speaking, and I went along to check it out. And I think back then it was actually in November. So different time of year, of course. So it was tons of fun and I had a great time, and I've been back every year since then. So I think that must have been 2021. Or two, could have been 2022. Anyhow, everything. Oh, wait, now I'm remembering. This is great podcasting, right? Where I'm just thinking out loud. But if I remember correctly, this is a bit of a history lesson. So the first one was in 2020, just before the pandemic. And I didn't go to that one. It wasn't on my radar or anything. But the next one was in November of 2021. And if I remember right, 2022 was skipped. And I'm hoping this is correct, but let's get back on track. And the thing is, I will see many of you, several hundred of you at EconoMe. I would love it if you came up and chatted with me. I might look like I don't want people to talk to me, like maybe I'll have my arms crossed or somehow look grouchy or something like that. But that's just how I normally look. So don't pay any attention to that and ignore all of my body language that's telling you, don't go up to Doug. He looks like he's not friendly. I am friendly. One thing I want you to keep in mind, in air quotes, my job is doing podcasts and YouTube. So I have to talk. A funny thing happens when I go to conferences. I talk to a lot of people, and pretty much without fail, I lose my fucking voice. So as I'm getting older and wiser, I realize I shouldn't try to talk to people in a super loud place where I'm just yelling so they can hear me. So one thing you could do to help me out is you do most of the talking. I'll ask you plenty of questions, but I need you to do most of the talking, and I probably won't say too much, which is great because I talk a lot here, and this is, my platform to talk. And when you see me at those conferences, I'm trying desperately not to lose my voice. And a pro tip, this took me a couple years to learn, but conferences, it is basically all loud rooms with a lot of people talking, and everything is super loud. So one thing you could do to help protect your voice, even if you do have a voice that carries, which I have a voice that doesn't carry very well, bring cough drops, throat lozenges. And, if you're watching calories or whatever, get the sugar-free ones or something with reduced sugar. Because the thing is, if you're eating like 20 or 30 of them a day, it does add up, and you don't want to be just chomping down on sugar. Another thing I'm looking forward to in Cincinnati is there's this cool Belgian beer bar / restaurant. It's just down the street. It's so freaking close to the Fairfield Hotel. And I think there's like 3 hotels, but they often fill up and blah, blah, blah. But it's kind of close to like where a lot of people are staying. So very much looking forward to checking out that Belgian beer bar, which is super close and just a convenient place to get to. I love Belgian beers specifically, and many beers otherwise, but that Belgian place is super cool. Now, one thing that we have been talking about a little bit recently is one of the new partners out there, and that's Mint Mobile. I switched at the end of 2023, and saved $1,080 specifically. I used to be on one of the big cell phone company plans, and technically I was getting some previous discount from back in the day, but I was hesitant to switch because I thought it was hard to switch to a new carrier like Mint. Now, the thing is, it turns out it's super easy to switch these days. Most people, not all, but most people have eSIM cards in their phone. So it makes it even easier, and you don't have to have like a physical SIM card and like pop your card out and have to put it in. New customers are eligible for really awesome deals. So when I signed up, I actually got any plan I wanted, like no matter how many gigs it was per month. It was $15 per month. You pay 3 months at a time. So it ends up being $45. And basically, my wife and I ended up signing up for the 5 gig per month plan, which is perfectly fine for us. And that is $180 for each of us annually. And previously, I was paying $1,440 per year. So you could follow the link, help support the show. You can go to milehighfi.com/mint, see what deal is active. And inevitably, if you're on one of the big cell phone companies, like you're going to be able to save a lot of money too. And it does help support the show. And I appreciate it if you check it out. Before I send it to the show, check the show notes and description down there. I'll put a link so you can sign up for the email list if you're interested. I am attempting to send an email per week or so. I kind of got out of the habit for a little while, trying to get back into it. I'm hoping to be able to share like new, different information. I do let people know like when the shows come out and who's on it in case you miss it on your feed or something like that. But basically, you can sign up for the email list and be informed when things are going on. So I think that's it for now. Thanks to GhostBed as well. They have an ad further in here, but like often I integrate it directly into the content and try to make it part of the conversation. GhostBed has been an awesome partner out there, so please check it out if you need anything as far as a mattress or sleeping or anything like that. And we do talk about it in depth. So thanks to GhostBed, thanks to Mint, and let's get to the show. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Mile High Fi podcast. And today I'm chatting with my friend Adam Coelho, and we're going to talk about why FU money is not enough. And he sent over this great idea about how a big vision can change your life. So Adam, how's it going today?
It's going great, Doug. It's so great to be here on the show with you.
We haven't caught up in a while. We met sometime last year at EconoMe and had some great conversations, had a couple drinks, and I'm glad we're going to be able to catch up today. But the cool thing is you recently left your job, and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. But what's the story with what you're doing right now since you're not working?
I'm starting to live into the big vision that I dreamt up many years ago. My big vision kind of always revolved around entrepreneurship and wanting to build my own business. And that took a lot of different kind of forms over the years as side hustles, or even before I started at Google, I had my own startup, didn't make very much money, but ultimately helped me get a job at Google. And this has always been in the back of my mind. I've always been building on the side. But my why for FI was really, well, I want to do this, but I want to pursue entrepreneurship, but I want to do it in a way that is from a place of sufficiency and enough rather than a place of lack and scarcity. Because we've all had that feeling where it's like, I want to make this happen, but I need this to happen. I need this to work so I can put food on the table for my kids. That's what I wanted to avoid. That's where I saw the power of FI. I can use my job to build wealth and kind of build this financial security and resilience, and I can pursue entrepreneurship from that place of strength. And so that is what I did. I started building within my job, outside of my job, with my own podcast, the Mindful Fire podcast. And that really helped me kind of get clearer and clearer on what that vision was. And so now I'm kind of taking that big leap into this next chapter and starting to put the pieces in place, or continuing to put the pieces in place, because I already started, but now with it as my sole focus. It's been great so far, but as we were saying before we started recording, I'm still trying to, kind of get used to the schedule, kind of a lot of holidays, kids off school, just trying to find that groove, that routine, which I think I'll find more in the new year when we're past the holidays and stuff. But, just this initial phase has been very exciting and, just trying to appreciate the progress as I go.
Well, congrats on the early retirement here. And there's so much to unpack there. So we'll sort of take it step by step. We're going to talk about some of your career. It's interesting. You worked at Google. Obviously, I think a lot of people know it's tough to get a job there. It's sort of one of the sort of high caliber, high productivity, like overachiever kind of like there's no way I could have worked there. I'll put it that way. But you had a vision to do something else. So let's talk earlier years. So you said you had a startup and then that helped you get a job at Google. So we could obviously spend like a whole episode on this, but like, what's the quick summary on like what you did at Google and all that?
Yeah. So basically I was working on this startup. It was called CitySync, and it was basically like Facebook events, but around the time Facebook events was first coming out. But, when you were getting spammed by a million of them, right? The idea was make plans with your friends and find things to do in your college town more easily. Not world-changing stuff, but interesting. I was working on that, not planning on getting a job, didn't go to the career fair, was like, nah, that's not for me. But I did have this thought in my head that, I want to go out to Silicon Valley, had this dream of like building the next Facebook or whatever, right? Because that was the time of apps coming out and things like that. I was like, all right, I want to go out there and on the gold rush, so to speak. And so I had this idea that, all right, I'll work for Apple and I'll work for Google. That's like literally the only ones I was entertaining, even though I knew nobody at those companies. But I just got this Facebook message from a friend of mine who I met in one of my classes, and she had interned at Google 2 summers. And she's like, hey, my team that I interned with is looking for employees. They're looking for people. Here are these 2 jobs. So I looked at the jobs. I was like, all right, yeah, this is interesting. I'll throw my resume in the ring. A month later, I was out interviewing in California, ended up getting the job, ended up moving across the country, kind of closing up shop on my startup, and kind of went into the AdSense world, right? So I was working with AdSense publishers and helping them grow their businesses and really just trying to make things happen. It's a very intense environment. Even back then, it was very intense. You're surrounded by everyone's all Ivy League educated and whatnot. And I went to University of Florida, right? So I kind of felt like it was a little bit of a cheat code, right? They're all sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And I'm like, Florida lottery paid for my college, like pretty good. So one thing led to another. And I was trying to make things happen, right? I was trying to create my own roles, had some pretty amazing opportunities to do that, but it was a roller coaster, right? Like the highs were high, the lows were low. I got an opportunity to go around Asia and teach user experience to publishers, spoke at a conference in China with an interpreter to 300 publishers, like just cool stuff like that. Got a chance to be trained as a facilitator. One of the big parts of my journey is mindfulness, as you could probably imagine from having the Mindful Fire podcast. And this is something that a couple of years in, when I was really struggling to make things happen and just kind of like banging my head against the wall, a friend of mine recommended I try meditation, which I had no idea what it was. Tried it, quickly realized I was horrific at meditation. Just my mind was all over the place, no clue what I was doing, and I was convinced I was doing it wrong. So I gave up. Luckily, he kind of doubled down on the pitch and had me give it another shot. And from there, I kind of established the habit. And the reason this is so powerful for me is because it's helped me understand myself a lot better, like to develop self-awareness, right? I think that self-awareness is absolutely the foundational skill that allows us to create the life we want. Because for the longest time, I had this inner critic, like we all do in our head, and I was completely unaware of it. It was driving me, but I didn't realize that it was just thoughts. And when I started to kind of turn down the volume on everything else and kind of sit in meditation, I started to see that as just thoughts. And it loosens its grasp on me. And I was able to kind of operate and move through my life and my career with more skill and more ease. And then I started getting clearer on what I wanted. I started, as I said, I became a facilitator of this program all about mindfulness and emotional intelligence called Search Inside Yourself. It was created at Google with experts in the fields of emotional intelligence, neuroscience, and mindfulness. And I was very fortunate that Google paid me and paid for me to be trained in this. And then I got to teach with like these expert facilitators and ultimately had the chance to train 3,500 Googlers around the world. And it was just this unbelievable experience that planted the seed of, this is what I want to be doing. This brings me alive. I love it. And from there, I just kind of followed those breadcrumbs, and that led to the podcast and my coaching business and all these things that I'm now excited to pursue full time.
And when did sort of early retirement and the FIRE community, when did that get on your radar? We'll try to overlay this to on the timeline a little bit.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. So I started at Google in 2010. I would say that the first 4 or 5 years, I was making money. I was saving money. I was doing the 401k. That was it. I was kind of like a little bit overwhelmed about investing, picking the right stocks, picking the right funds, all that. So I just kind of like, I'll figure that out later, kick the can down the road. And it wasn't until a buddy of mine, David Moltz, who's probably hearing this, so shout out to David Moltz. He and I started on the same team on the same day at Google. So we kind of grew up together there. And he ended up being a groomsman in my wedding and vice versa. He came to me, he's like, hey, I want to do a side hustle, but I don't want to do anything with ads. We did ads all day. We didn't need more ads. And so I'm like, why don't you go learn about investing? And he did. He went and looked into it. He found the FIRE movement. He found Choose FI. He found the simple path to wealth. And he was like, dude, you got to learn this. I took him up on it. And I started learning about this and I became obsessed with it. So I'd say that was probably like 2015 or so. I was 5 years into my career. And that's when I really started going down the rabbit hole, started doing the mega backdoor Roth IRA, just like Google has all these programs and kind of financial benefits that I was just not taking advantage of. And once I started seeing like, holy cow, I can put like an extra 27,000 in this tax advantage thing. Like it just really was up and to the right from there. So that was huge for me.
That's awesome. So 2010, started working at Google. 2015, you're exposed to these new ideas. Did you then have like a timeline? You were like, okay, I kind of want to stop working in a few years. Obviously, you could run some projections and really map that out. So how did that look? Did you put together like a timeline like that?
I kind of had this idea that like, it was like 5 years in the future, but it kind of became like a rolling 5 years, like to the point where like my boss, who was I had this awesome boss for like 6 years, which is unheard of at Google. We get reorged like every 6 to 12 months. But I had the same guy who was supportive of me doing all this stuff for years. And he was like, dude, aren't you supposed to be retired by now? I was like, but I kind of had this like 35 number in my mind, and it ended up being 36. But it was kind of one of these situations where like, yeah, I could have moved a little bit sooner, but like kind of had the golden handcuff situation. So yeah. And I had kind of unfinished business in the company with regards to like the facilitation and my vision that I was trying to create within the company. So that was still going okay and I still had runway there. So I wasn't feeling like a rush, but it was, around like the 35-ish timeline.
Okay. Very cool. And I don't know, like Google is one of those companies where it's like people think if I could just get a job there, it'll be so awesome. But my hunch, like all jobs, there's some BS you have to deal with. It's a huge company. There's politics. You were talking about reorg. You have your fucking annual reviews and all this
Hmm.
stuff. I
Hmm.
dislike that very much. Some people like it, but most people don't. How did you feel? Because you had all these great opportunities. You were introduced into meditation and some other stuff. That said, you were probably stressed out from something leading you to the meditation. So, can you talk
Yeah.
about working at Google, knowing that Google listens to everything that we publish on the internet? So,
Yeah, um, yeah, no, it was a roller coaster, man. That's like how I described it in my kind of goodbye resignation letter that I sent. It's funny. I actually like packaged that up and kind of put that as like a thing that people can get on my website. So if anyone wants to read that, you can get that at mindfulfire.org/letter. But maybe you're not interested. But I'll give you the gist of it. Is I always described it as a roller coaster because even from the very beginning, like I had these, it was awesome. I went to my first like company wide meeting where like Larry Page and Sergey Brin were up there joking, saying ridiculous stuff. And then like they had like lobster on a stick, like literally lobster on a stick, beers. And I was like, this is the best. But at the same time, the pressure it was like never good enough, right? You could be doing great. You could get a good rating. And it's like, well, what have you done for me lately? It's just the nature of the beast. And honestly, like I would say that Google before COVID was one company and Google after COVID is a whole different company. And since the layoffs that started last January 2023, like that is when things really like the culture took a dive. And it's pretty unfortunate, honestly, but it's how most companies operate all the time. But it just became a little bit challenging, but not a little bit, very challenging. I'd say the last year of my career there was quite challenging. That you always hear this idea, and we talked about FU money, right? Like why we have FU money is because we know that things can change at any time. There's always that maxim that one bad manager or one person can mess up a good thing. And unfortunately, I had that situation. I had a manager that just was not doing what they needed to do. They were supposed to be supporting me, and instead they were attacking me. And so I had to deal with that. And I had FU money in my pocket. And since reading Simple Path to Wealth, I'm like, yes, FU money, we need it. It's critical, and it gives us power on the path to FI. But then I realized throughout this experience where I had to kind of deal with this situation, as I said, I had unfinished business. If it wasn't for this big vision that I had that I was trying to make happen, I would have just taken my FU money and run away. But that would have only got me so far. I think that FU money is so powerful because it gives us options and it allows us to make choices when we're in a situation that's really toxic and really bad. But let's say I ran away from that bad situation. 2 months later, I might be like, okay, well, now what? I'm now retired or I'm needing another job, but I have no idea what I want because I was so caught up in that situation that I was trying to escape from. I never thought about what I actually want. And so I think that the FU money is essential, but what we really need as well is a big vision for our life. And so despite these challenging situations that I was in, I had a clear vision for what I wanted. And I'll just kind of state my big vision overall. My big vision is to build this business in my own time, in my own way. And the business is to lead workshops for teams and companies. I call it my Ask What's Possible workshop, where I help teams, individuals, and companies think really, really big about what they want and what they're trying to create with their business. Take away all the constraints, think really big, and then get each person aligned to that big vision. And ultimately, I wanted to do this outside of Google, but I saw a huge opportunity, and I thought about this for years. I saw a huge opportunity to do this at executive summits. Google will bring like the C-level of a client, say Procter and Gamble, C-level of Procter and Gamble will come to Google. They'll pull out the whole dog and pony show and show off all the cool things Google's doing in AI, self-driving cars, all that stuff. And they'll basically try to get them to spend more money with Google. That's the whole point. I wanted to bring this workshop to the beginning of that summit. And what that would do is basically get connection, creativity, curiosity, and conversation flowing from the very beginning. And that would kind of lift the rest of the day. So I had this clear vision in my mind. And when this nonsense started with my manager, I was like, okay, it's go time. Let's do it. And I wanted to pitch this guy who's the president of the large customer sales. He was my old VP. He was very supportive when I had this amazing opportunity to present at the CEO's Leadership Conference, which we can talk about. That's probably the biggest thing I've envisioned for myself. But I wanted to pitch him. And ultimately, because I had this big vision, I was able to just take step, put one foot in front of the other, and ended up like pitching him on this in the micro kitchen, right? The little break room, and then getting a meeting with him. Then the meeting was canceled. And then I waited outside of his office, and then I pitched him. And one thing led to another. I ended up with a pilot to test this out with the executive teams. And so I see this all as just kind of taking steps and planting seeds towards my future vision, because now I have those relationships. I have those kind of proof points that I can then bring to others as I'm outside building this business going forward.
So a lot to unpack there too, but I want to jump back a little bit. So you mentioned Google was much different before COVID versus after. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think that just like the culture of the company, the priorities of the company, like I mentioned, I was a facilitator for this program that was created at Google. That in itself was a symbol of old Google. This was the most popular course at Google. There would be hundreds of people on the waiting list. And this was like a 2.5-day workshop where people would leave their job, go to this event. Sometimes their managers would pay for them to travel to this, and they would pay us facilitators to go around the world and do this. And that was because they saw the benefit of investing in their people. And they knew that it was a stressful environment, and they knew the power of self-awareness, self-management, motivation, empathy, and leadership, which is what this course taught. And so we would literally have 2 days of content, and the third day was a half day. It was like a retreat. Like we did like a silent retreat at Google. And it was amazing. So that was a perfect symbol of that. So that was before COVID. And during COVID, they were so generous. They gave us money to have a home office. They gave us money for well-being, ridiculous stuff. But the problem is, like all the other tech companies, they hired so many people. And I don't know what they thought, this was going to last forever, but they hired so many people, became so bloated. And then basically, I think Wall Street reacted to that. And then they went into, we got to cut costs. And everything was gone. They started pulling back even on little things like snacks and things like that, and travel budget and client budget, things like that were obviously doing it, all the while still printing money. So it's why are they doing that? But ultimately, I think the layoffs, when I say before and after, it was January 20th, 2023. That was the line in the stand. And just the way they did the layoffs, I think changed the culture dramatically.
Okay. Got it. All right. So a couple things we could dig into. Number one, you mentioned FU money. A lot of people are familiar with the idea of it. How did you define it? Some people are thinking just a couple months of money. Other people would think it's a few years of money, or, the ability to retire, that sort of thing. But how did you view FU money?
Yeah. I really think that the way I thought about it was just having money in the bank. I didn't have a specific amount. It was more when I started really thinking about it in a real way, because I started dealing with more challenging stuff at work. But for me, it was I have enough money in the bank that if I need to leave this job, or I lose this job, I'm not worried about it, right? I mentioned the layoffs in January. I know people, I couldn't look away. When that happened, I was reading every LinkedIn message. I could not stop reading them. And it was heartbreaking. You think about these people that live in California. They might be working for Google, engineers, whatever, making $500,000 a year or more. They have a $3-4 million house, which is a nice house, but a regular house in California. And then they lose that job. Now they're 6 months away from losing their house or less. And so for me, it was always like, I want to be good no matter what. And so that's how I thought about FU money. It wasn't so much like a specific dollar amount. It was like, I got my money in order. I'm on the path. I'm saving and I'm investing. And I know that if I lose this job or I need to leave this job, I'm good for a while.
And I have a little story myself of FU money. I wasn't really thinking of it that way, but back in 2015, my wife and I wanted to do some slow travel, and we were kind of uprooting from Atlanta. So we sold our condo, put our stuff in storage, headed to Montana, and my whole team was working remotely anyway. And some people, while they didn't tell the management, they were moving out of state already. There were people that had already moved and stuff, and they were doing whatever the fuck they wanted. And I was like, well, we're going to move probably to Colorado, but we ended up staying in Montana. And I remember I called my manager and I was like, hey, here's the situation. We moved out here, would love to work it out. Apparently, I had the confidence of FU money. We weren't thinking of it that way, but basically I said, I would love for it to work out. And I like the team, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, I think we can work it out. But I was like the first of all the layoffs, even though it was a relatively high performer. And it was, honestly, it was great to get laid off. My life is totally different. I didn't have the balls to quit anyway, but I basically said, you have two choices. We can keep working together or not. And it ended up being, a layoff. And it was great. So, I mean, the power that it gives you, like you said, it gives you options and more confidence. It's like,
confidence.
I could have done it before. So one thing, I didn't necessarily have the vision of what I wanted to do. And I think for some people, if they're in a very stressful environment and it's go, 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 it's like, I could imagine someone would potentially need to get out of the stressful situation, let their mind clear, decompress, and not have a vision. Can you elaborate on that? I think you agree. You're nodding. So
yeah, I agree. I think that's absolutely true, that if you're in a situation that is so bad, that is so toxic and having an impact on your health, you're going to need to get out of there first. And I think it's, generally speaking, people that I've talked a lot about to a lot of people about vision. And I always ask people what their big vision is, because I'm kind of obsessed with it. A lot of people don't have an answer. And it's because a lot of people haven't carved out the time in their busy life to ask, what do I actually want? And if you're in a situation that's super toxic and doesn't give you that space, you're going to need to get yourself out of there. And there's a couple ways you can do that. You can quit. You can go on mental health leave. I took mental health leave earlier this year, and that was essential for me to do that. And I very quickly went into this all right, gotta go mode, right? Going into the exact scarcity that I described not wanting to have with my kind of business and entrepreneurial life. I went right into that. I replaced my bad manager with me for about a week. And then I was like, whoa, this is not it. And so then I gave myself the space to decompress for a few months, and I started to get into a bit of more of a rhythm, right? I already had the vision, but if you don't have the vision yet, create some space, go on mental health leave, take vacation for a couple weeks, and then just sit down and think about what you actually want. I have this free envisioning exercise on my website. I have a special page, mindfulfire.org/Doug. That's mindfulfire.org/Doug. You can go and grab that there. But that is basically the core of my philosophy on envisioning. It's part of my workshops that I'm going to do at companies. It's the core of my coaching program. And it's basically just, what do you actually want? Take all the constraints, all the limitations, the ideas of what's rational, possible, realistic, just put those in a little box, set that box to the side, and think really, really big about what you want with no limits. And I think that's really, really powerful, because when you give yourself permission to think and dream big, new ideas are going to come up and new connections between ideas are going to come up that might change everything. But yeah, to your question, Doug, you really have to give yourself some space. And FU money, as I said, it's not like it's either or. You need both. And FU money is the tool that allows you to have that confidence. I think that's the key word there is the confidence and the power to be able to get yourself out of that situation, give yourself some breathing room to then think, what do I actually want? And then envisioning and thinking big about what you want, using exercise like mine, will help you set those limitations to the side, think about what you really want. From there, you can start, as I talk about it, planting seeds in your mind, taking advantage of the neuroscience of how your brain works to start moving towards that vision little by little by little.
Okay, this episode is brought to you by GhostBed, and we have a GhostBed Luxe here. It's a bit on the softer side, and we prefer that. And the cool thing is GhostBeds have like a cooling technology. There's many layers, like so many beds out there, but it has this cooling layer, which actually does feel cool to the touch. I'm traditionally a hot sleeper. So Adam, my question for you, are you a pretty good sleeper? How does that go for you?
I am a pretty good sleeper. Yeah. When my kids aren't waking me up in the middle of the night, I can sleep pretty easily, and I can fall back asleep pretty easily. That's something that challenges my wife, but I'm able to fall asleep pretty easily.
All right. Well, and do you monitor and track your sleep with any sort of technology or anything?
I've had an Oura ring in the past, but I would say hit or miss, and the numbers weren't looking good, so I didn't want to look at them.
Okay. And actually, I've heard that where, a lot of us are fans of like Huberman or Atia, and it's like it kind of encourages you to like be more analytical about it, and it's like it actually stresses you out when sometimes I wake up and the first thing I do is I check did I sleep good, but really I should ask myself, did I sleep good last night? I shouldn't look at my watch right away. So I could see that being a problem. Now, have you always slept pretty well, like since you were a kid?
Yeah, more or less.
It's so lucky. Like me and Carl both have struggled, but I've dialed it in a little bit more. So since you sleep pretty good, you probably didn't do anything specific with like supplements or your nighttime routine, or do you have a specific nighttime routine?
I need to, right? So I would say I am fortunate that I sleep pretty well. My habits around sleep could be improved, right? I don't prioritize going to sleep at the same time. I think for me, it's like I have young kids. So like the time that I have to myself is after they go to bed. And so for me, it's like hard to trade that for a little bit more sleep. But I certainly could benefit from it because I am tired quite a bit.
Okay. Are you a napper? Do you nap during the day?
When necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, I can and will nap when necessary. Yeah.
Got it. I will too. And one thing recently, I think I've been getting better sleep, maybe because of the new Ghost Bed. I don't know, but I've been getting better sleep and I don't need the naps, which is great. So it's just like, if I don't need a nap, like don't go to sleep during the day, but sometimes on vacation, or honestly, I pretty much take a nap every day when I go to a conference, because the extra stimulation of conversations and like being in a different place and all that, I'm wired all the time. So I take a nap like at every conference. So interesting.
That's great. You got to power up for the nighttime party.
Yeah, that's right. And there's always one day, usually the first day, which is a classic mistake. I'll stay up way too late on the first day, and then I'm just a little bit behind mentally for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So all right. Well, thanks a lot to GhostBed out there. It's a family-owned business with 20 plus years of experience. They have over 60,000 five-star reviews and 101 night at-home sleep trial. So You can save 50% if you go to ghostbed.com/milehighfi or use the code milehighfi at checkout. So let's get back into it. And we were talking about the big vision, and well, you mentioned it before, and I can't remember if it was in the Soundcheck, but as a podcaster, we can get free sort of coaching and help and therapy. So I am currently, I don't have a big vision. I'm a bit of while I'm optimistic, I am very realistic, and I think I'm a nihilist as well. So it's like, you can go to some darker places there. So I don't dream that big, and I'm content and happy right now, but it is good to be marching towards some larger goal where you can set up your days and your weeks and, your life overall to be productive and moving towards a goal. So how important is it to have a big vision all the time? Can we be a little bit unmoored like me for periods of time and still do okay?
Yeah, I think it's more of like getting clear on what you really want. And when I say, big vision, right? I use this term big vision because I challenge people to think big. And I think one of the unique things that I bring to the table in these workshops and in my coaching is giving people permission to think big about what they really want, right? To entertain ideas that they may not ever have actually entertained, or to revisit dreams from when they were a kid. But ultimately, like when I say big vision, it's like, just what do you want? I talked to this one guy, and he has achieved some level of financial independence. He's an attorney, and all his big vision was he wants to say no to more cases. He can't say no to these cases, and then he overloads himself and he's working all the time. His big vision is saying no to more work so that he can hang out with his kids and garden. Jordan Grummett has a book coming out soon, The Purpose Code, and he's going to be on my podcast on the day the book launches, January 7th. And he has this idea of big P purpose and little p purpose. Big P purpose is like curing cancer, right? We all think we need to have this huge purpose, but little p purpose is like being a good dad, being a good friend, going and helping out at the senior citizens center, whatever it might be, where it's something that just gets you connected to other people. And so I think similarly when I say big vision, it's like, just actually think about, what do you want? If you could do anything, what would that look like? And it might be a huge, big thing like building the next startup, or it could be, I just want to kind of go through my days in a relaxed way, right? I had a client in my last program, her big vision, she just wanted to be present and kind of cook and garden and bring people together around food. That was her big vision. So we kind of crafted affirmations and practices around that, and mini experiments and all these things, so that she could start planting the seeds, no pun intended, planting the seeds of that vision and kind of orienting her mind towards seeing more of that and moving towards that, even if it's not like some world-changing thing.
So you mentioned affirmations there, and that's a little bit on the woo-woo hippie side, right? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Is it a woo-woo concept, or affirmations powerful?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. And, I've kind of been mentioning a few times this idea of the neuroscience, right? Of envisioning. All of this stuff that I've kind of cultivated and kind of brought into my approach of mindful fire and envisioning was kind of battle tested at Google, right? I was teaching this to engineers. So they are not generally into the woo-woo. So I always took science approach to it, a neuroscience approach to it. So let me kind of take a aside before we get to affirmations. Let me just share like how I think about like the neuroscience that makes envisioning work. There are two things I want you to know about your brain. The first is the idea of neuroplasticity. This is the idea that your brain is changing in terms of form and function all the time based on experience. The thoughts, emotions, and kind of what you pay attention to changes the structure and function of your brain. If you think about any skill you've ever learned, say playing a guitar, At first, the finger movements are uncomfortable, the sounds don't sound familiar, and you certainly can't read music. The more you practice those things, it becomes easier and easier. And that's because the neurocircuitry associated with those motor, auditory, and cognitive skills become kind of well-worn paths. They're literally forming synaptic connections in your brain associated with that. And so everything we think, feel, and pay attention to is doing that all the time. And I always talk about it. Our stories create our reality because of this. We have a history of, I mentioned earlier, like the inner critic, right? I was thinking these negative thoughts over and over again for years. And all of us are doing this. And that just becomes our reality. It becomes the lens through which we see things. The second thing I want you to know is that our brains are predictive. And there was this researcher that kind of looked into this, and she published an article called The Predicting Brain. Her name's Regina Polly. And she said that even before events happen, our brain makes a prediction of what's most likely to happen and sets in motion the thoughts, perceptions, emotions, and even physiological responses for what's expected. She goes on to say, in a sense, we learn from the past what to predict for the future and then live the future we expect. And so again, our thoughts create our reality. Our stories create our reality. And so what we've paid attention to in the past, the thoughts and stories that we've practiced in the past are kind of feeding the prediction machine for what we're going to get in the future. Think about when someone who says, oh, they have a story. I always have bad luck. I just have bad luck. And what happens to that person, right? They get bad luck because they're looking for it. And so when I talk about the neuroscience of this, it's basically that we can choose a new story to create a new reality. And so this brings us back to envisioning. Thinking really big about what we want allows us to plant the seed in our mind, right? I kind of summarize this whole neuroscience thing as like our thoughts and our stories are like seeds. The ones we pay attention to most are the ones that we're planting and watering. And those are the ones that are going to grow. And so we can choose to plant new stories and create a new reality. And so thinking about what you want with the envisioning exercise I mentioned, which again, you can get at mindfulfire.org/Doug, that will kind of plant the first seed of that and create new possibility for you. Now, getting to affirmations, I call them in my group coaching program, the Fire Starter program, I call it mindset affirmations, right? It's like, all right, you're clear on your big vision. You want to be an entrepreneur and you want to lead these workshops, taking my example. Well, what mindsets will help you move towards that? One mindset that I've always practiced since I really started embracing this, and it helped me through a pretty tough time, was the world is abundant with opportunity. I wanted to see opportunity out in the world. I wanted to see potential workshop clients. I wanted to see opportunities everywhere. And so that is one that I would practice. And the practice is you say it out loud. The world is abundant with opportunity. Then you visualize in your mind examples of how that was true in the past. Well, I got this opportunity to work for Google, and I got this chance to go to Asia, giving my brain evidence that this is true. Then I say it again. The world is abundant with opportunity. How is this true in the present? Oh, well, I'm here talking with you, Doug. This is a great opportunity. I'm thrilled about it. Perfect example. Then how is this true in the future? And that's when you start projecting into the future. Well, I'm going to have this opportunity. I'm going to speak at the leadership summit for Google CEO, things like that. And you kind of see yourself doing it. And why this works is because your brain doesn't really know if it's true or not. You're just planting the seeds. All the things that we worry about and then that the inner critic says, those aren't true either. So we can choose a new story and plant the seeds of those new stories through something like affirmations. So I keep it very practical. I'm not all about like the manifestation and the raise your vibe. I was talking with my friend about this last night. You got to do shit. You can't just sit on your ass and hope for the best. You got to plant the seeds and then put yourself in a situation where you can move towards what you want.
Great explanation and answer there. Okay. So we're starting to run short on time here. So you've given us a ton of stuff. I know you haven't been working for a little while, and my wife, Elizabeth, she stopped working about 6 months ago, and sometimes it's a little tough to get into the routine. So how have you found it to have, freedom to do whatever you want, and all this extra time, most likely? How's it going for you?
It's going pretty well. I think there's kind of two parts to it. On the one hand, I'm loving it. I'm loving not working. I'm loving being able to do whatever I want. I'm loving being able to, I mentioned before we started recording, we got a bad sickness throughout the whole family last week. And I was able to just move any meetings or conversations that I was going to have to another day. And I didn't have to worry about telling a boss. My boss last year, I literally had COVID, and my boss told me, "Can you send a doctor's note?" And I'm like, no one has ever asked for a doctor's note at Google. And you're asking me for a doctor's note for something that everybody has? I didn't need to deal with that shit. I just canceled whatever I was doing and stayed, got better, took care of my kids, and that was it. I was able to just go play golf and go to the driving range. And I've been swimming a lot at the YMCA and just trying to do things that I've been talking about wanting to do for years, like investing in my health. And, I went for a swim this morning. That has been huge. And a big part of it has been decompression. You mentioned FU money, getting out of a bad situation. I'm very much in that as well, right? I may have a clear vision for what I want, but I also need to recognize that there's no rush, and I am coming off of a year of very, very challenging stuff. I need to decompress. I'm coming off of 14 years working at this insane, fast-paced environment where nothing was ever good enough. I need to decompress from that, and that's what I've been allowing myself to do. And hopefully going to start finding a bit more of a routine after they're in school and no one's sick and all of that. Cause I think that will be really helpful for me as well.
Well, let's think about that. We're talking about envisioning the future and stuff. How do you envision that routine for, say, whatever an average week? I know from day to day, people do a little bit of different stuff, but yeah, what does an average day look like, say in the middle of January when you got the routine down?
That's a great question. So I would say for me, one thing that would be really valuable is getting back to my morning routine. And I said, getting back to it. I haven't done it since before my son was born, which was 6 years ago. So, the book, The Miracle Morning. Have you ever read that, Doug?
I didn't read it, but I'm familiar. I listened to a bunch of interviews when it came out.
Yeah. You get the concept. It's wake up an hour earlier and invest in yourself and, take care of things. I was doing that, meditating, doing a little exercise, journaling. That would be a great way to start my day. And I would love to do that, kind of before the kids wake up, or even including them in it, because I think they'll wake up as I walk down the stairs. And then kind of from there, having a, relaxed morning, getting the kids eating their breakfast, hopefully, getting my son on the bus, things like that. Then I'd love to go swimming, making the fitness as a core part of it. Then come back, kind of work on the business for 3 hours or so, 3 or 4 hours, kind of focused work. And that could be being a guest on podcasts like this, recording podcasts myself, writing, kind of promoting. I'm really going to have two main kind of offerings: the Firestarter group coaching program for people at or near financial independence that are kind of feeling stuck. They want to get clear on what that next chapter looks like. And then the corporate workshops, right? So those are the two offerings I'm going to do. And I'm going to promote those with LinkedIn, my podcast, and going on other podcasts. And so just trying to keep it super simple and focused those couple hours on that. Then ideally have lunch with my wife, go pick up my son. And I would love to just kind of have the afternoon where I'm just spending time with the boys being my sons. And then next year is going to be a lot about let me be the best dad I can be. For all the mindfulness I do, I'm not always the most mindful and calm and relaxed parent. It's a little frustrating when you ask a kid to do something 15 times and they ignore everything you say or do exactly the thing you told them not to do. So I really want to work on that. And then just spend the evening with my wife or go to comedy shows or things like that. And that's the vision. And obviously within that, doing the coaching program, going and doing workshops in New York City, things like that as well. Maybe once or twice a week would be like the kind of on days, so to speak.
Got it. And one follow-up on that is, how many hours per week do you think is ideal for you? I think it varies from person to person. So yeah, what do you think in your time working is?
I'd say like 20 hours max.
Yeah.
It
seems pretty
like,
good.
Yeah, just I love doing it. I mean, I love doing the like coaching and the podcast conversations, like I like the interacting with people, but like the marketing and the trying to like doing sales calls and stuff like that. When I say like build this business in my own time in my own way, like I got a good taste of that during my mental health leave, where I was like kind of pre-selling my coaching program. There were days where I was like, I gotta do it. And I feel like I'm like trying to sell the person, but like more and more, I just kind of relaxed into like, if they want it, great. If they don't want it, great. It's okay. Like, I'm not trying to force anything on anyone. I don't need the money. I like making money and I want to kind of continue to provide to the finances of the family and things like that, to open up more possibilities and vacations and things like that. But I don't need to force it. And so finding that rhythm is what I'm really trying to do. And going back from mental health leave kind of into the environment that I went back to was threw all that away. But I had a taste of it and I'm kind of working my way back to it.
Very good. Adam, this has been a lot of fun. You mentioned the links earlier, so no worries. We'll put those in the description so people can get to it and all that. But where should people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at the Mindful Fire podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, you can go over there and just hit subscribe. And yeah, as I mentioned, if I'm a huge believer in getting clear on what you want and starting to live your post-FI life now. You really shouldn't wait till you get there to the FI number to then start figuring out what that is. Use the envisioning exercise. Think about what you actually want and then start planting the seeds now. And you'll be surprised. Before you know it, you'll be looking at your life and being like, wow, this thing I wanted, A, B, and C, I'm already doing that. That's the secret, right? Like I teach this whole workshop. I teach the coaching program. The secret at the end of the coaching program is you either already have or can have very easily that thing that you say you want. So you might as well get clear on what it is and start doing it now, because some things are going to work. Some things you're not going to like as much as you think. And so again, you can find that at mindfulfire.org/Doug. And if you have any questions, you'll get on the email list. You can hit reply anytime and ask me any questions, and would love to hear from you.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Really appreciate it, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Doug. Great to be here with you.
Thanks for listening to the show. That was the Mile High Five podcast, and I'm Doug Cunnington. If you dig the show, please do 3 things for us. Number 1, tell a friend, a family member, an enemy about the show. We really don't care who you tell. Maybe forward them a specific show that you know that they will like. It's the single most helpful thing that you can do to spread the word. It's like giving us a virtual high five, and actually we don't give high fives in person, so the virtual kind's pretty good. And more importantly, your friend or family member or even your enemy will appreciate the fact that you were thinking of them. Number 2, make sure you're following or subscribed on your podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, YouTube, whatever you're using, and that way you won't miss a show. And number 3, please leave us a rating and review. We read them on the show occasionally, and you might hear yours out there on an upcoming episode. Quick disclaimer, this show is not financial or legal advice. I'd actually be surprised if it sounded like it. It's really just for entertainment, and that's at least what we're hoping for. But seriously, get advice from professionals. So we'll catch y'all next week. So you have your podcast, which we talked about during the interview, but what got you into podcasting? Like, why do you like the format?
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, I think that my whole reason for podcasting was kind of twofold. First, it started for me wanting to figure out what the hell I want to do after I retire from Google. And I started out thinking I was going to be a meditation teacher. And I talked to meditation teachers and quickly realized, well, that's part of it, but that's not the whole thing. And then the second thing that I realized quickly is that having a podcast is a life hack for meeting awesome people. You pretty much can get a yes from anyone you invite on a podcast for whatever reason. So I think that's been the bigger benefit and why I keep doing it.
Yeah, it's a great hack to expand your network without having to travel to conferences, because that's another great way to have like more in-depth conversations. But you also get to interview maybe some of your friends or people that you have in your life anyway, but you could ask them questions that you can't normally ask because it would be weird. But in a podcast interview, you can ask those questions. Have you found that as well?
Oh yeah, you can do whatever you want. Another thing is like you invite these experts on, whether they be friends or just like random people that you admire. You can ask them whatever you want. I basically turn all my episodes into like free therapy / coaching sessions. I don't intend that, but it just ends up that way. And everyone's cool with it.
What was like the biggest challenge, like after you got started podcasting, that you didn't foresee, where you were like, oh shoot, this is actually way harder than I thought?
I think that's got to be like editing and consistency, which go hand in hand, right? Because I burnt out on editing, the consistency was lacking, which then means that I've taken breaks and, kind of lost the momentum. But just keeping up that weekly schedule is very challenging if you're doing it all yourself.
I'm trying to, because I've been doing my 2 podcasts for like 5 years. And I think when I first started, the consistency thing I wasn't too worried about, but as time has gone on, it's been a little bit of a challenge making sure that I'm interested to keep doing it. The motivation has shifted. At one point, it was sort of like top of funnel to sell online courses. And then it shifted when I stopped promoting those and selling those products. And then it's like, okay, well, which portion of this do I actually like? Which I think, that probably happens for anything, even if you like the kind of work or the creativity or whatever it is you're doing. At some point, it's like, okay, this has become routine. So you have to introduce something novel into it, which is an ongoing challenge. But the good part is like, this is communication and conversation. So it's like, it's probably something that almost no one's going to master, and you can continue to like try to improve it if you view it that way. So yeah,
definitely. I think there's a big craftsmanship element to it, especially if you care. Like, for instance, I went to an event the other day with Doc G and Paula and the guys from Stacking Benjamins, and they were talking about how they do a table read. Like they write a script and then they do a table read like it's a sitcom each week. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of work, but a lot of craftsmanship, and also like pretty interesting. Like, I could, Chris and I recorded my retirement episode yesterday, and it was like, yeah, I could have put a little more thought into this, right? Because we just kind of we had an outline, we got going, but I see how like having a little bit more thought out, more detailed outline, and then kind of running through it would be very helpful.
Yeah. I was just reminded, I was talking to Joe from Stacking Benjamins, and like, yeah, they treat it like a TV show. They like, I think they took like improv classes and I don't know.
Stand-up stuff.
It's a really good show, but yeah, you could tell when people prepare. And like to that point, we haven't, when Carl and I were doing this show, we didn't have to throw out very many episodes. I think maybe only 1 or 2, but it was like clearly our fucking fault when we
get a track.
Prepare. Yeah. It's like, as long as one of us prepares, like it usually can work out. And then it's like not one person has to do all the lifting, but then if neither of us prepare, then it could be a train wreck. So anyway.
Could be. Yeah.